Hi, folks. You're at Tacitus Today. Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about an issue that I've discussed in different ways and many times before, is mass Indian or subcontinent. So let's include India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, all that sort of stuff. So subcontinent migration to the rich white West. Now, there are I think it's 2.2 billion people in the Indian subcontinent. They're all dirt, well, other than the rich elites. They're nearly all dirt fucking poor. The average wage is 1/20th or 1/15th or something of the Western wage. So these people are gagging. In fact, gagging will be an understatement. Double gagging, triple gagging, to get out of their dirt poor circumstances and go to the rich white West. Now, they're not coming to the rich white West to share wealth, to create wealth, to build wealth. They're coming to loot, to steal, and to take anything they can. Now, if they manage to fall into a cozy arrangement, why not? But they're just coming to steal, and we should be very clear about it. So why the globalists want to bring these people to the West is quite beyond me. But other than to create a an era of neo-serfdom and feudalism, which I suspect is at the bottom of all this anyway. But let's have a look at the Indian. Now, a lot of the Indian nationalists, Indian activists, race grifters and hustlers, there's no shortage of those out of India. They're claiming that the white people, they are racist, they hate us, and so they go down that path. But is it hatred at all? Because hatred is a word that's bandied around now. With the casualness of the schoolgirl says, "I hate rainy days. I hate it when this. I hate it when the waves are too big at the beach." That hate used in that throwaway sort of sense rather than actual hatred. Where the activists and grifters say there's no place for hate, Nazis hate, Hitler hates, but that sort of thing. So let's have a look at now. When Indians first started, I'm old enough to remember when they first started arriving to the West, or certainly into Australia anyway, and also elsewhere, say Britain. I didn't come really. I came across Indians in the United States a little bit, but. Australia was certainly, I was there at the front line when Indians first started coming. Now, Indians sort of took a view, pretty much every Indian I came across, that if they didn't get what they wanted, which was zero accountability, maximum benefits, and that their sense of total entitlement had to be realised and indulged and catered for. If they didn't get that, their response was, "Oh, you just hate me. You're a racist and you're a bigot. And you don't like me because I talk with an accent." That type of thing. They would go down that path, and that's very much a try and I'll accuse you of something first, so that you won't judge me or you won't evaluate me independently. And that, for example, say employee performance evaluations. One thing I noticed was almost universal. When having to evaluate female employees that reported to me, it was almost a universal thing that they would, come in, Jane. Thanks very much, and I took this as just an administrative procedure to do that I had to do as my job. I had men and women, and to me it was academic stuff, but they would always, pretty much universal. This was. They would start with, this is even before word one, they'd start, "Oh, I know you hate me. You just hate me, don't you? You hate me. That's it, you hate me." Well, what are you talking about, hating? What do you even mean? "Oh, you just hate me. I know you." What example or proof do you have that I hate you then? "Oh, I don't need anything. I just know that you do." And then they'd be, and the shaking of the head and the tossing of the hair and the flouncing and so on. And of course, there's a way of getting ahead of the curve that I don't want to be accountable. I don't like being accountable. I don't want to get an evaluation on, arriving late and goofing off early, or I don't want that. So if you say anything bad about me at all, the only reason is because you hate me. But I noticed this almost exact same behaviour amongst the Indians, male Indians I'm talking about here. So I'll just go back, and I've been over some of this stuff before, but when the Indians first started arriving, the numbers weren't large. They were mostly the Brahmin caste, that is the elite caste in India, and they represent, I don't know, 3 or 4% of the population, I suppose. In some articles I've seen, they represent 5%. But the rich Brahmins represent a tiny proportion. And some of these Brahmins are very, very rich. Some of them have more than 100 servants on their estates, servants that they either don't pay at all, or they're just allowed to sleep on the floor of the cellar and eat the scraps off the table and this sort of stuff. Bear in mind that the upper class Indians believe the lowest class of Indians are even as low as animals, less than that even. So that needs to be understood. Now the Brahmins, when they first started arriving, they're part of the elite class, and they're unaccountable in India. They're simply not accountable in any way. Perhaps to other Brahmins, but that's all. So they're a superior social status, and people of superior social status must not be accountable, should not have to work for a living, must not and should not be judged by others who have lesser position. So because university lecturers and so on were all typically of a lower caste, or lower Brahmin caste, if you like, then the Brahmins could go to university and just get given degrees. It was their social right. It was their social entitlement. So they have lives of they're entitled to have monopoly businesses, and yet no one else is allowed to sell products to compete with them in that region or district. And their social status. They, for example, can go to just walk in the front door of anyone from a lower social status. They can just walk around, help themselves do what they want to do, look at what they want to look at, pick up and handle what they want to handle, and walk out again. And the person of the lower social status isn't allowed to say anything or complain. It's just such as the entitlement that the Brahmins have. Anyway, this was the first class of people to come to Australia, and they would arrive with claiming to have double PhDs in computer science and all sorts of things like that, and various expertise in this. And the company that I was working for at the time was the board. I had to meet the board of directors once a month and give a State of the Nation address type thing. And those guys, they were an entitled elite set. They'd never worked a day in their lives, those guys. But they read in the financial pages, financial magazines and so on, that these very highly educated Indians were coming to Australia, and they were geniuses, they were experts, they were this, they were that. And you could hire them for less money than you'd pay a local Australian computer coder or computer program. So I'd hire them, and because I was being hustled, and I didn't think they were that well qualified. I saw, being a reasonably well-travelled business guy, I sort of saw through that. I thought, no, I just don't believe these people are that well qualified. Nonetheless, I got hustled into it, and so I started hiring some of these people who were pleasant enough people. Again, if you want to talk about the philosophy of Socrates and this sort of thing, and they're very pleasant people to talk to. You can develop some nice repartee there, and I did enjoy talking to them on that superficial social sort of level. Now, so when I hired them, firstly they regarded me as being someone of inferior social status, and therefore I had no right to judge them, to question them, to give them directions, to give them instructions. They would sort of take a humorous. They'd smirk and smile and, okay, well, you want to tell me what to do, and that's kind of funny, you're lower social status person, because I wasn't a Brahmin in their view. And they're not used to, they're people that maybe never been told what to do in their lives. This is by their parents or something like that. So, so they just wouldn't do any work. They would sort of swan around looking important, but they wouldn't do any work. And when I would ask them, well, what have you done? The very idea that they should work, that they're being paid to do a job, and they would explain it to me. Say, well, look, you've hired me because of my superior social status. I'm here to swan around, looking important, sounding important, looking like a hot shot, looking like I'm hot shit. That's all I'm here to do. The idea that you expect me to work. I mean, you silly white man. What do you mean work? And that was really their attitude. And so I'd put the screws on, saying, no, I want you to actually do something. You're being paid to do a job, so I want to see some results. And they'd bluster and they'd wave their arms around. How dare you question me? I am of a superior social status. And it would all sort of come. And so in the end, I came down to look, Jeet, you have to cut a line of computer code in front of me while I'm watching right now. No, right now. Otherwise, you're out of a job. Do you understand that? This is not like a debate or something where we can go through some sort of Socratic dialogue here. You need to do your work. And then the guy, only then the guy would admit, well, actually, I don't know anything about computers or cutting computer code. Because I come from a wealthy, well-connected, prestigious family, I just get given any degree I want. I just say what degree I want, and they just give it to me. And my family, gives them a bit of money and looks after the folks in the university. And that's it. So my degrees are really social prestige degrees. They're not degrees that indicate competence or achievement or accomplishment or that I hit the books and so on. So, and once you realise that about the Brahmins, I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions to this. I'm sure some of them really did hit the books and work hard. I'm sure some of them are very smart, just not very many. That's all. And even if they are smart, they don't see why they should do any work. Their social status is the issue, not how bright they are, hardworking or industrious. In fact, they regard such an idea of industrious behaviour as being, quite uncouth or quite vulgar, as the upper classes in China do as well, by the way. Now, this sort of progressed on from there. The numbers were small at first, but they started to increase. And the Indian government made it almost mandatory. If you want to trade with India, you have to allow masses of Indians to migrate to the West, whether on long-term work visas or as citizens, it doesn't matter, but shitloads of them. And a very, very substantial proportion of the Indian economy isn't India itself being a wealthy country. It's Indians working abroad, particularly in the West, the United States and so on. Indians working abroad and sending money back to their families in India. That's a huge. I mean, we're not talking 1 or 2%, 10%. We're talking a huge slice of the Indian economy depends on that. Now, India's still a dirt poor basket case country. That they'd be super fucked and screwed if they didn't have all this money coming in from Indian workers abroad. Now, the Indians make terrible migrants for a couple of reasons. One is that they want to loot and steal and take as much as they can and give as little as they can. Whatever money they do spend is spent among other Indians, whether they send it back to India or only spend within their communities. They're very, very tight. They won't use an electrician unless it's an Indian. They won't buy cars from a dealership unless that dealership's owned by an Indian. They don't want to buy stuff. Now, some of the national grocery store chains get a bit out of them, but effectively they stay within their own community. They don't marry outside of their own racial diaspora, genetic diaspora. They send back to India for husbands and brides, even 5, 6, 7 generations after they've lived in the West. They do not integrate at all. Sure, they may speak with an Australian or US accent. They might go to the schools and this, but they do not integrate. They stay, marry, procreate, and do everything they possibly can within the Indian community. Again, several generations on. And if they did that for the first generation or firstborn generation, you might go, okay. But no, they don't. 5, 6, 7 generations on, they still claim to be Indian and they still want to send back to the village of their ancestors. So these are people that want to live apart. The sons and daughters that say want to date or marry or whatever local people or anything outside of the Indian genetic diaspora are frowned upon and threatened with excommunication, dispossession, and all sorts of things to bring them back into the genetic fold. So Indians, I argue, would make or do make, not will make, do make the worst migrants. They will create and do create and have created a complete racial genetic subset where they argue and demand special dispensations for their own their own genetic diaspora. They do not even think or conceive or consider the common good. They believe because they're so easy to steal money from white people, we must be stupid, naive, and pathetic, which only emboldens them to even demand more and steal more and take more. So, if you were looking at the worst case of people to use as migrants, then this is it. I don't think you could use people that would be more destructive to the Western social structure than these Indians, which makes me think the globalists are determined this is a purposeful, premeditated attempt by the globalists to undermine the Western social structure. And Indians are the easiest and the most rare, most numerous, by the way, to come over to be brought into the West. Now, Indians are being brought into. It's not just that they're being brought in; it's the number. There are whole areas that had not a single Indian in them 2 years ago. Now they look like Little India. In 2 years. 2 years, for fuck's sake. So this is being done purposefully all over the West. And now, do I hate or dislike Indian? Well, no. I don't know anyone who particularly does. But I don't like it being forced on me or the rest of the population. Forced, not asked, not requested, not debated. Forced upon the population. And if I've got any query or any problem with that, hey, you're just a Nazi, you're Hitler. No. I reject that absolutely. You're bringing in a lot of these people that don't want to integrate or have anything to do with us, the local population. And it's not like they're particularly hard workers. They're not bringing skills in that are needed. They're not adding value to the economy at all. Far from it. I would argue they're subtracting heavily from the society and the economy, but yet it continues. So are Indians being hated on? Oh, no, I don't agree there. Are they unwelcome guests and are they being forced upon us? Well, yes, they are. And one hopes that remigration or repatriation becomes an issue. Now, in the case of Indians, if you cut off affirmative action and quota hiring and diversity, equity, and inclusion, the number of Indians employed will plummet. The only reason they're getting jobs as quickly and easily as they are is they're being gifted, not earning. They are not earning. I want to make that crystal clear. They're not earning. They're being gifted through quota systems and affirmative action and diversity programs. They're being gifted jobs they otherwise would not have a snowball's chance of getting. Because they're such a naturally entitled people, they think it's because they're so smart. Oh, I must be brilliant. Look, I got a job within 5 minutes of walking off the plane. No, you didn't. You were gifted that job at the expense of the taxpayer. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's a government job that's funded directly by taxes or it's a multinational company that has diversity quotas and hires lots of Indians, which many of them do, because those companies rely 100% on government projects to get by. So the government just tips in more taxpayer money to sweeten the deal in return for these companies hiring gazillions of Indians. So if the taxpayer pays either way, then these people extraordinarily loot the treasury for everything they can that isn't nailed down. So the taxpayer then pays again for that. So what benefit do these people bring? Well, zero. Zero is the benefit. Now, are there bright Indians that would meritoriously warrant bring real genuine skills and abilities to the West or to Australia? Well, sure there would be. There just won't be very many. You'd be lucky if there's 1 or 2,000. Lucky if there's 1 or 2,000 a year. And if those people want to come to Australia and they're meritoriously evaluated and they're meritoriously bringing skills into the community, I've got no problem with that. As many of those people as you want to bring in, you can. There just won't be very many of them. The numbers will be very small. As when you apply merit, numbers are always very small. But I'm okay if they come in. So looking at the looking at the mass migration to the West of Indians, it is an absolute net and total negative to West, whenever Western country they go into. And this idea that only Indians could do AI or this or that or rocket science is bullshit. So this is something, but no one's hated. No one hates anybody, and this needs to get out of the dialogue. And it's unhelpful. The reality is that gazillions and gazillions of third world parasites are being brought in the West, and they bring no value with them. That's the issue. You've been with Tassers today, your Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.
Well, actually, not only do they not bring in